Hello and welcome to League of Musings Episode 2. I'm Joseph Thorne and I own and write for the website esportsmusings.com. This is the second episode in this vlog series and we've got a lot of topics to talk about today. A lot of news lately. So we're going to talk about ZionSpartan CLG, aka the worst kept secret NA. We're going to talk a little bit about Voyboy leaving Curse, what that means for their team and what that means in terms of the trend of professional players retiring to go to streaming instead of playing competitively. From that, we'll move on to Deft to EDG and the other rumors regarding Korean players moving to China. And we'll finish up talking about the official OGN format for next season, the Season 5 Summoner's Rift changes, and their implementation to the expansion tournament. And if I have time after that, then I'll talk a little bit about IEM Cologne, but I might table that until the official vote is done. So, ZionSpartan to CLG. I mean, everybody knew this was coming. This is not big news. It's been rumored for weeks. It started with the tapping up allegations from Odie, Dignitas's owner. That article that Richard Lewis wrote month and a half ago. So this is not a big surprise to anybody. How he meshes with the team, it'll be interesting to see for sure. I've been watching him stream with Double Lift a lot lately, and they seem to have a pretty good rapport. I've never watched a top laner stream who communicates quite as much as he does. Whether or not that translates into LCS from solo queue remains to be seen because obviously those are two completely different beasts. I think it's a good move, but it brings up a lot of questions for me personally. And I sort of want to go back to the beginning of the summer split. Now, Monte Cristo has stated on numerous occasions that CLG's first choice for their top laner before they picked up Seraph was Zoro Zero. And it makes you wonder what would have happened if this move had been made instead of picking up Seraph after Zoro Zero decided he didn't want to go and play for CLG at the last season. Would their fortunes have been different? You never know with these types of things. The what if question game is always a difficult one to play, especially with League of Legends esports. But I have a feeling that they would have probably finished the season a little bit stronger had they have had a more um, carry-oriented top lane presence. Now, it's been funny to watch Double Lift and Zion and Afromoo and Zion and all the other CLG members stream because they've been consistently joking about the whole CLG equals top lane death meme. And it's going to be interesting to see whether those jokes end up bearing fruit and that isn't true. And I mean, I don't know. It's going to be interesting no matter what. And by the way, I apologize if I say things are going to be interesting a lot. Like I said in my last vlog, this is a very new thing for me. So please forgive me if I'm repeating phrases or words or just speaking poorly in general. I'm excited. I think it's a good move. I've always liked ZionSpartan as a player. I think he has the potential, the CLG buzzword of, since forever to be a top the top North American top laner, and he's a very skilled player. He can carry teams, and maybe this will help alleviate some of the pressure that's been on Link to sort of pick up the second carry role if Zion is capable of fulfilling that himself. So, like I said before, this isn't really, I mean, it's big news in the sense that it was finally confirmed and there hasn't been any word from Riot yet as in terms of potential fines or punishment to CLG for the tapping up allegations. So that remains to be seen if that's going anywhere. But good move for CLG, sort of a wait and see type of thing because you never know. CLG's made so many roster moves over the last year and a half that you never really know how they're going to pan out. So it'll be interesting. That phrase again, interesting. So the bigger news out of NA is Voyboy leaving Curse. I don't think anybody saw this coming outside of their team. It seemed to catch the community by complete surprise, caught me by surprise. Obviously, I have no ties to the Curse organization or any other organization for that matter. So I just, went on Reddit yesterday morning before I went to work, saw the news, read Voyboy's Facebook post, and it was it made me think, and this is a topic that's come up a few times on Summoning Insight, on Trash Talk, on First Blood, about the money in streaming being so big that the competitive scene has like not even caught up, not even come close to catching up. So players are, have a better opportunity to make money by streaming full time. Now, I think that's an interesting contention, but these players, if you look at Twitch on a daily basis, if there are pro players streaming, typically they have the most viewers. I mean, the Night Blues, the Hayam Gosus, and the Trick 2Gs of the world, except like set aside, but like any other day that I've been on Twitch, if Bjergsen's streaming, he's by far got the most stream numbers. If Doublelift is streaming, he's way up there at the top. Meteos, if any of these guys are streaming, they have huge numbers. Uh, More so than the professional streamers. So I feel like that for Voyboy especially, him being a professional player gave him the fan base and the platform to be able to transition into becoming a streamer. And I think that will there be a trend of players who quit professional play or retire or temporarily take a leave of absence to move to streaming to make, apparently make bank? Possibly, but I feel like a lot of players that play League of Legends do so because it's hyper competitive. And if you want to, sort of fulfill that aspect of the game to the best of your ability, then the LCS is the place to do it. And it's going to be a question as to whether these organizations are going to be able to get the sponsorships and money to be able to catch up to the amount that these players are making, these streamers are making. I don't know. The problem with big money, then the sort of big sponsor myth is that, I mean, look at Samsung, and this is what I wrote about in my last blog post about Samsung's off season, is that they are a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 500 company that sponsors dozens of top-tier athletes like the David Beckhams and Usain Bolts of the world, and has many sports teams that they sponsor, paid 16 million pounds a year apparently to sponsor Chelsea for the last 5 or 6 years on their shirts, and they were unwilling to match the funds that were being thrown around in China to their own players, and they basically lost their whole roster. None of them have re-signed with the Samsung organization. So I mean, these big companies need to be willing to pay the money to keep their players, and that's sort of the fear I have, is that yeah, North America, Korea, China, Europe, the regions might be getting, the big sponsors might be coming, but their willingness to give the money necessary to prevent players from going into streaming full time or from moving to another region where they're going to make that kind of money, that's remained to be seen, because as of now in League of Legends esports, no company has proved that they're willing to do that. So I don't know. That's sort of the always the caveat I've always wanted to say whenever people talk about let's just wait for the big sponsors to come in, because that's not necessarily a guarantee that these players are going to be able to be compensated on a level that's at least in the realm of what some of these guys are making on Twitch. So speaking of Twitch and Curse is leaving Azubu. I think this is a fantastic move. Twitch is I mean, they're by far the most dominant streaming platform in the world right now for esports players and for just gaming in general. It's a good move for them. It's a good move for Twitch, and especially with Piglet. I mean, he's going to get a huge audience right off the bat. I think he's starting to stream this week. I mean, I occasionally will go to Azubu to watch some of the Fnatic players or some of the Kespa organizations. Less so that many of the best players are leaving the Kespa organizations, but and the Azubu numbers are just dwarfed by what's being put up on Twitch on a daily basis. So good for Curse. I think that you're going to continue to see organizations move away from Azubu unless Azubu starts paying uh, fat contracts to these teams to have exclusive streaming rights, and that seems to be their model to get these organizations to stream with them, because otherwise the money available on Twitch and the viewership numbers available on Twitch are just too tempting. Too tempting for the pros, too tempting for professional streamers, too tempting for everybody to want to move to a different platform. So I think it's a smart business decision by Curse, and I think in the long run it's going to work out for their players very nicely. Let's see, what else do we have today? Deft to EDG. Now, this has been rumored for a while, and I don't even necessarily want to talk about the move itself, Deft moving to EDG, as much as the ramifications it has on their current AD carry Namei. Now, I didn't get a chance to watch Into the Rift last night, and I know that Kelsey Mosier was a guest there, so I probably should have watched the VOD to hear if she had any news on what Name was doing. So I can't speak to that with any knowledge or with any secondhand knowledge. I just sort of want to talk about him as a player. I know that a lot of North American and European League of Legends fans don't watch LPL. So their only exposure to Name was Worlds this year. Now, if you watched his performance at Worlds, considering the amount of I hate to use the word hype, but hype I guess is the only I mean it's the only adjective I can think of in this scenario. The amount of hype that Name came into Worlds with as one of the top 80 carries in the world. Um, Great positioning 80 carry, always knows what to do in team fights. Not the strongest laner in the world. It's sort of similar to Deft, but more adept at all of the skills that he's good at. And his performance was underwhelming considering the amount of there's that word again, the amount of hype that he had coming into Worlds. He sort of was the Dade of this year's Worlds in terms of like Dade underperforming last year, and I mean the entire Samsung White, which was then Ozone team underperforming, but Dade in particular was singled out as being the player who came in with the most amount of praise, who did not live up to the compliments paid to his play style and skill level. And Name was sort of the version of that, very much talked up player this year who did not perform. And I remember reading that he's considering retiring or that he might be moving to OMG. And I really hope from the bottom of my heart that he does not retire, because I don't want to see a player of his caliber who has dragged these teams in China to through the LPL playoffs to LPL titles and who has played phenomenally in China. It's going to be unfortunate if his legacy in the West is this year's Worlds, because that is not indicative of the skill level that this player has. He is an incredibly talented 80 carry, and it's just going to be that sort of like uh that what's the word for it? Shit. That sort of like crowd mentality, like sort of just like ganging up on his, and criticizing his performance at Worlds and being like, "Oh, you analyst A or blogger B said that Name was the best 80 carry in the world or top 380 carry, and look at what he did. He was destroyed." Or, I mean, he wasn't destroyed. He just didn't play as well as he normally plays, and like he's not as good as you say he was. Look at what happened at Worlds. Blah 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 blah. Like that would be really unfortunate if that's his legacy in the West, because it's just I think it just shows a lack of context in the greater picture of his career, because this guy has performed out of his mind in China, and I strongly encourage people who sort of had this very narrow view of Name as a player. I strongly encourage you, go back, watch VODs of EDG this past season, and just watch him play. Watch his positioning in team fights. Just watch what he's able to do on the Rift, because he is and should be regarded as still one of the strongest 80 carries in the world. And I mean, I know it's sort of like stupid to think about, like, a player's legacy and like the Reddit like community or like the fan like sort of like hive mind, but for a player like that of that skill level, it would be unfortunate if like every time I go on Reddit and someone brings up Namei, there's going to be like, oh, 2014 Worlds, blah, 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 blah. It's just like, that's not, one tournament does not define a player's legacy, and that tournament should not define his legacy in the event that he does retire. Then again, he might not retire. Like I said, I did remember seeing a rumor somewhere that he might be going to OMG, and that's why Deft, EDG picked up Deft to sort of make a swap or something. I don't really know the details. I just hope that Worlds 2014 does not be the defining factor of Name's uh, career or the defining tournament of his career because it's not, like I said, it is not at all indicative of his skill level. And if you don't believe me, go back and watch China Talk episodes where they talk about him. Go back and watch Summoning Insight episodes where they talk about him, or just go back and watch the VODs of LPL because this guy's an insane player and he deserves to be recognized as one of the best 80 carries in the game. So, all right, let's see. Now, the biggest news I think that I want to talk about, well, not the biggest news, but some of the biggest news, was the official reform plan that Kespa released regarding OGN for next season. I'm going to preface this by saying that I really like the changes, most of them. I really like most of the changes. I should qualify that statement. I like most of the changes. I like the move to a league format. I know tournament format is sort of more of a cutthroat and really does show like what teams deserve to be in the group stage, but I always read the complaint from, whenever Invent articles or forum comments would be translated to English or just like in general Korean fans posting on Reddit would always say, like I'm a fan of X organization and they never make it out of the group stage. So like my team season is done in like 2 weeks and I don't get to see them play again for a couple months. And I think that's unfortunate. That's sort of what the league switch to a league system does. It provides more stability for these teams to actually able to uh, build on success or try and fix failure when they have it because they're going to have more opportunities. It does sort of, go to that idea that, now some of the games are a little bit more meaningless, but that's an endemic fact in any league system. You're always going to have meaningless games. It's like I always make this comparison. I made this comparison in one of my past articles when I was talking about reducing the number of games in the LCS split. Is that currently when you have like a super weeks, when you have super weeks and you have this many games, it's more like the NBA season where a lot of teams can just coast or rest players until the playoffs, as opposed to like college football where every week you have to win every game because you're not going to make it to, or you wouldn't have made it to the BCS title last year and the years before that, but now you won't make it to the playoff unless you win almost every game because every game is so valuable. And I think that I like league systems, but I do think that league systems need to have a balance between um, length and meaningful games because I do think there's a correlation between the two. I think that seasons that are too long and you have too many meaningless games and seasons that are too short, which is sort of like what happens in a tournament setup, is that the games are there's too much not that there's too much riding on the games, there just isn't an opportunity to overcome like missteps at the beginning of a season. So I like that move a lot. Let's see. Sorry, I just need to go over this really quickly. Hold on. I'm gonna pause the video for just a moment. So if there's like some weird editing in here, I apologize. I just need to go get some water really quickly. So hold on a minute. And I'm back. Sorry about that. Just needed to get some water really quick. Anyway, OGN changes. I am a very big fan of the minimum salary and minimum and mandatory contract term portions of the changes, and especially that Riot is providing the minimum salary for the five players in each team's roster as a supporting measure. I think that is going to help these newer or fledgling organizations that aren't the big Kespa organizations, because when OGN expands from 8 to 10 teams in the spring, you're probably going to see some more struggling organizations and having these financial measures in place to help them actually like build a brand and build a team that can actually be competitively viable. Having these financial sort of safety nets in place is going to provide some stability, I think. I'm a big fan of most of the changes. I think that I mean, as unfortunate as it is getting rid of the sister teams, I think that especially with the exodus of the number of Korean players that have gone to China, I think that the consolidating rosters of the Kespo organizations is going to be the only way to make up for the loss in talent, at least in the short term. I mean, there's no doubt that Korea, the solo queue, I mean, they have a wealth of talent in that country when it comes to League of Legends. Whether or not they're going to be able to replace some of these like big name players like the Dandies and Dades of the world, I mean, those players don't grow on trees, but maybe a player can be groomed into something resembling a player like that. I mean, you never really know with with stuff like this. You don't know who when these solo queue gods come out of the amateur scene and come into the professional environment, whether they're going to thrive or just buckle under the pressure. So, anyway, the financial measures I think are very important. Um, whether or not teams pay players on top of that minimum salary remains to be seen. I think they're going to have to, otherwise, players are just going to leave to regions where they could go and make more money. I think in the short term, you might not see some of these players getting more than the minimum salary, but these organizations are going to quickly realize that if they want to remain competitively viable, not just in Korea but internationally as well, that excuse me, that they're going to have to pay their players. The show me the money is going to come into this, and these players are going to want to be shown the money. So in the short term, you might continue to see Korean talent go to China or North America or Europe, but I think in the long term, these organizations are eventually going to realize that they're gonna have to pay the market value of these players, and hopefully you won't see another Samsung situation where a major corporation's unwillingness to pay the players, these top level players, the money that they deserve in order to keep them on their team. Hopefully, you won't have another situation like that where players just are like, all right, well, you're not paying me, so I'm going to go somewhere where I'm going to make my money. Uh, and I think it's really cool actually that the qualifying tournament for the two teams that are not the six main teams that have already received a automatic qualification to OGN Spring or Champion Spring. I mean, it's next week. We've got that tournament next week. We got the NA and EU expansion tournaments coming up. We've got IEM San Jose and IEM Cologne in December. I mean, I was worried that there wasn't going to be a lot of League of Legends action from now until the beginning of the spring season in all the regions, but I mean, apparently we're going to have something every couple weeks from now until the new year. So that's awesome. I'm really excited. It's going to be really cool to, get competitive league back so I can stop talking about these off-season roster madness and actually start talking about some games and their implications on season 5. It's gonna be good. It's gonna be good for the fans. It's gonna be good for journalists and bloggers like myself who can move away from the roster shuffle and move into some more meaningful discussions. Finally, I think I'm going to talk about. I think I'm going to table. Like I said, I'm going to table IEM Cologne until the fan vote is done. I do just really quickly. I do think that Curse is going to get in of the NA teams available. I really do think they're going to get in, even though they don't have a mid laner set. The rest of the rosters don't have complete aren't completed yet. Uh, Dignitas apparently has completed their roster, but just haven't announced it yet. Depends on who those players are because this is a popularity contest, and I do think that the curse hype is going to overwhelm any other team's you know chances of getting voted into I am Cologne. So just briefly talking about that. That's just initial thoughts. We'll see what happens when the voting is finished. Now, a lot of controversy recently over the implementation of patches for the expansion tournaments. So the online portion of the NA expansion tournament is going to be played on patch 4.19, which implements the new Summoner's Rift map, but not the jungle changes, just just the visuals, just the map itself. So it's going to be like any other patch. I mean, teams have to adapt to stuff like that, and especially challenger teams always are adapting to stuff like this. And the expansion tournament and the ladder was no different. I mean, when a patch came out, they still had to go through it, adapt to it like any other team. The problem is, and the controversy is coming, is that the full patch 4.20, which is the official preseason patch, is being implemented 3 weeks before the offline portion of the NA expansion tournament. That is huge. And unsurprisingly, there's been a lot of backlash against Riot's decision to do this by managers, players, and organizations that are in these expansion tournaments because this is their make or break moment getting into the LCS. This is a career defining moment for these players and these teams. And to have that moment be predicated on a preseason patch, which is granted it's been beta tested, but there's always bugs, to have their fate of their careers essentially be tested on such a massive change to the game calls into question whether this is the wisest decision. Now, there was a Reddit thread titled "End of Expansion Tournament to be with New Jungle." I'll link it in the comments section of this vlog, where a writer describes the process in which this decision was made and believes that the 3 weeks leading up to the offline portion after 4.20, the official preseason patch has been implemented. They think it's enough time for teams to adjust and for Riot to hotfix any major bugs or issues that may crop up. Now, there's two arguments. On one hand, there's the argument that I've heard a lot that teams are forced to adapt to new patches all the time. This is nothing. This is not a new thing. They're going to have to. These teams are going to have to do this in the LCS. This is the map they're going to have to play on in the LCS. They might as well get prepared to do it now. Part of being a good team is adapting. Sort of goes along with that argument. On the other hand, it's like I said before, this is such a huge change, and for such an important tournament for these players, having this massive of a change in only 3 weeks to figure out team composition, strategies, viable champion picks, uh, how to like function in the new jungle, and how that affects the overall metagame. That's a lot of information to process in 3 weeks. It takes a long time for teams to adjust to patches most of the time. I mean, look at Cloud9 last split. They didn't have very favorable patches at the beginning of the split, and they struggled, but they eventually adjusted and ended up finishing first in the regular season. But the difference between the expansion tournament and a normal split is that's a league. There's 11 weeks and 11 weeks. I mean, I don't know how if Riot's changing the length of the schedule or anything like that, but last year there was 11 weeks in the regular season, and that's a long time to adjust to the various patches as they come out because it's not like a patch is coming out every week. I mean, usually a patch would be played for a couple weeks before a new one would be implemented. That's a significant period of time for changes that, excuse me, for changes that pale in comparison to what's being implemented on patch 4.20. This is a tournament. This is something that's happening over about a month. And 3 weeks to adjust to this, it's just not a lot of time. And I completely sympathize with the players playing in the expansion tournament, their management, the team owners, whoever is involved in this anyway. It's hard not to sympathize with their perspective that, there's the possibility of them getting cheesed by some team that figures out some broken strategy that won't be viable when they get to the LCS, and people will look at it and be like, "Oh, that's a wasted LCS spot," or that there will be some game changing or game breaking bug that won't get discovered until a competitive match. There's a lot of variables that go into this, and I understand the fear. But on the other hand, I'm sort of 50-50 on this. I'm like, one hand, I very much sympathize with the players that have to like go through this situation because it's very difficult and their professional careers are on the line. So it's easy to understand why this is such a big deal. And on the other hand, I also understand the argument that teams have to adapt all the time, and the teams that are better at adapting more often than not are better teams overall. So it's gonna be it's a crazy situation, and it doesn't look like Riot is backing down from their decision to implement this patch during the offline portion of the expansion tournament. So I mean, it'll be cool. It'll be cool to look at, and it'll be cool to see. I mean, I feel like this is a move almost for the fans to get an opportunity to see what the new Summoner's Rift looks like in competitive play. But it's not going to be easy for these players, and hopefully, I mean, I sit here and I hope that it is a situation where the best teams do adapt, and the most deserving teams in the expansion tournaments are the ones that get into the LCS. But you never know with a bit changes this big. It's hard to predict what's going to happen, and I sympathize with the people who feel that this is an unfair move, and I also sympathize with the argument that adaptation is part of League of Legends, and if you can't adapt quickly enough, then you're not going to survive an LCS anyway. So I sort of am on the fence on this issue. Understand both arguments, sympathize with both arguments. I mean, having gone through the list of changes, I went through the News of Legends has a really good like preseason for dummies post, which I went through. I thought it was very comprehensive. I'll link it in the comment section. And I don't play jungle very often. In fact, I try and shy away from it because it's just a role that I'm not very good at. But like, I mean, this is almost gonna be a fresh start for every jungler, just because the complete item overhaul and just like the new camps and the new buffs that go along with them, the multitude of different smite options, the changes to Baron and Dragon, the scuttle crab in the jungle river. It's a lot. It's a lot of changes. Uh, it's I don't know. Like I said, I'm on the fence. Half of me is like, well, teams have to adapt all the time. And the other half of me is like, well, teams adapt over the course of the season and not over the course of a tournament. And this is a big change to have over the course of a tournament instead of just like a regular patch. So I don't know. I hope the best team, like I said, I hope the best teams make it through. But with this type of change, you really never know what's going to happen. So I think that's gonna do it, guys, for this episode of League of Musings. I'm gonna upload this vlog first, and then I'll try and later on today I'll go back, rewatch it, and then link all the articles, Reddit posts, whatever that I talk about with timestamps. I'll try and do that later today. I just want to get this vlog up as soon as possible. And yeah, expect another one next week. I have an article that I'm working on that has to do with North American server ping. I'm trying to get data from North American players. I have a survey. Not very many people have taken it. I don't have a very large sample size, so it's hard for me to write the article without more people having done the survey. It's only 7 questions long. It'll take you like 5 minutes. If you have the time, I'm going to link it in the article, or excuse me, I'm going to link it in the blog, the comments section. Please take it. I really want to get this article out this week. I don't know if it's going to happen unless I get more results. If I don't, I have another story that I'm working on, at the same time, and I'll probably just go with that one. So expect a blog post by Friday, no matter what happens. If you haven't had the opportunity to read my post on Samsung's offseason, I encourage you to go back and do so. Like I said, take the survey if you have time. If you don't worry about it. I just think this is a really interesting topic, ping in North America and how that affects the player pool for the professional level. I've something I've wanted to write about for a long time, and the more people that take the survey, the better idea of I'll have about where this sort of the data will take me in writing it. It's hard to write without a larger sample size available to me. So thank you for watching. Visit esportsmusings.com. Read my stuff. All my old articles are on there. Yeah, have a good day. See you guys later.